let's continue to give it 1 second. But yeah, I think the one craziest thing from the combine is now people starting to like be like, oh, is Mesidor better than Bane type of conversations, just because
Just because of what arms? Is it really because of the
really
arms?
just because of arms. I saw, that guy who used to just do film review on his own, but now kind of does the NFL stuff. I'm blanking on the name.
Young kid or
Younger guy, who kind of just did stuff on his own, and now he's like doing film review on like the NFL's official page. He started to be like, now could Mesidor be better than Bane? I think that's going to be kind of a little side plot going on as we kind of get further into draft season. But without further ado, Shay McDonald back here with Jaden Gonzalez on another episode of Miami Primetime Live, brought to you by FanDuel. And now you can find Miami Hurricanes live in whatever show you subscribe to on Spotify, Apple Music, and more podcasting platforms. Let me just double check on the different platforms you can find us on. But Jaden, how you doing?
Doing great, Shay. There was football on my screen last weekend, and after about 2.5 weeks of nothing being on football-wise, it's nice to have something, albeit the NFL Combine. I'll take it. Football being on is cool. Seeing our guys on the field doing drills, some of them for the Combine, all of that. I enjoyed it. It's nice to have some football on my screen as we get closer to spring football.
Yeah, absolutely. We are getting closer to draft season. I think right now, Combine, we start to hear a little bit of those talks. Who's going to go where? What trades are happening? As a Pats fan, it's been a really interesting week with those A.J. Brown trades, the Max Crosby trades, and seeing where those might go. But as a Miami Hurricanes fan, it was very impressive to see certain, kind of workouts. We'll talk about Markel Bell, Akeem Mesidor, Ruben Bain, all those types of guys that we kind of go on. But yeah, I mean, it was really we're getting into draft season, which is really fun. You kind of see the mock drafts fly. You follow your favorite draft, YouTube, Instagram, whatever you want users. But just to be sure you guys know, you can now find Miami Hurricanes live and other Voice of College Football platforms on Apple, Amazon, Google, and Spotify. Just so you guys know, so you can check us out all over the internet wherever you wish. Jaden, yeah, so just to kind of dive into it, I think the first thing we got to talk about is the biggest thing that's really gone on in this combine, which are Ruben Bain's short arms. Do you really think they are concerned? Because we watched them all season, and we were like, this guy's a beast. Do you think that could really be a concern going into this draft?
So we were talking about this on I was talking about this on the call-in show on Thursday, and I kept making it clear that the whole debate about his arms is so I'm already sick of it. But if just from the eye test alone, look, I'm not a scout. I don't watch. I'm not breaking down film. I don't know what guys are prospects that can turn into, whatever. But what I do see is, what I saw when I was in the press box for 3 years watching Ruben Bain play. And I watched what I saw was a first round pick at a very minimum, a guy that the sack production was there, his ability against the run, his ability to set the edge, his ability to do anything. The eye test was there. Overwhelmingly, he was dominant in all sides, at all things, doing anything that he so pleased. He was a dominant player, a dominant force, the best defensive player on the team for the last few years. To say that his arm length will be the reason he won't translate to the NFL, I think is stupid. There were even talks and debates about it. I believe CeCe Malinois was asked that question. I know draft expert Daniel Jeremiah was asking around about it. And I mean, the overall perspective of it was obviously you wish you had bigger arms, but it isn't, for a defensive lineman, specifically an edge rusher, a guy like Ruben Bain, who's very physical, he has a great bend, stuff like that. It's not as much of a concern than it is either an offensive lineman or someone who is a finesse guy. So I really can't see it being that much of a detriment. I mean, this is something that's been carrying with him since he was in high school, where, the arms, he's got too short arms. I believe they were talking about it, about why he was never a 5-star despite his absurd sack numbers at Miami Central. They said, well, his arm length and his built and his body size isn't elite. Okay, well, then he'll just prove it in college. And he's proved it year in, year out. And I think it's just the same narratives that he's heard over time. I really hope it doesn't affect him, and I don't think it will. That's just the way that I see it right now.
Yeah, I really agree with you, because I get it. The arm length can be a little bit of an issue in terms of disengaging from blocks here and there, and especially in the run game. But you look at the power that Ruben Bain presents as an edge rusher, and I think game in, game out, you really saw that kind of wreck teams, regardless of how long his arms are. He was constantly able to get in the backfield. He was constantly able to go and stuff runs. And then what we saw in the playoffs was against some of the best pass protectors in the nation. We saw him constantly get after quarterbacks, put pressure on them. And really the one game where we didn't see it against Ole Miss, they were really getting the ball out really fast. And that's really the only way we've seen teams be able to stop Bain this last season is when teams were able to get the ball out really fast and kind of prevent him from impacting the pass game in that sense. But I think that creates a whole other dimension. When you have this guy that you can really move around all around the field, that's when you get guys like, think about a Micah Parsons where Dallas or now Green Bay will now line him up wherever. But I think Ruben is just so powerful in the run game that he can just be a dynamic force on your defense when you add him. So whether you're, the Jets or the Cardinals or whoever's picking that top 5 area, you're not only getting a great pass rusher, which Ruben Bain can wreck the pass game, you're getting a great run defender. You're not getting this one guy who's going to be one-dimensional, which what you might see with like a David Bailey, who's more of like a speed rusher, or a Cassius Howell, or pick your guy who's going on, in terms of those edge rushers. What we're really seeing from Ruben Bain is this multi-dimensional ability to kind of bend around the edge, kind of put one arm into his offensive lineman and get around him, move along the offensive line so we can exploit mismatches and kind of impact the game in multiple ways. So regardless if you're looking at Ruben Bain in one position or another, he's really able to impact the game in so many ways that I don't think arm length when we get to the NFL level is really going to be an issue.
I 100% agree. I think it's a stupid debate and it's an argument that's only being talked about. I was thinking about this on Thursday and unfortunately for you, the whole Will Campbell stuff during the Super Bowl to me is kind of almost exacerbated it because when they talk about Will Campbell, they were like, oh, Will Campbell, short arms. And now they just, kind of see any, offensive or defensive lineman, short arms are like, whoa, this guy's not, maybe not be the best player. First of all, Will Campbell is a good player. He just had a bad game in the Super Bowl. And the issue of why he was bad in that game wasn't his arms. It was bad movement. He wasn't really, his technique was poor. He was getting abused by the Seattle players. I think it's a dumb argument, dumb debate. I mean, Maui Noah was asked the same question. He said it really isn't that much of an issue. Honestly, for a defensive lineman, the fact that his heart and his mentality, the way that he goes about everything, the guy eats, breathes, and sleeps football. He will never get a haircut. The way that he shows up to anything, that is who Ruben Bain is. And we've seen him for the last 3 years. His mentality and his belief, everything that he does is a guy that's a top 5 pick. Yeah, it's our bias, but we've also watched him for 3 years. We've seen him this whole, since he's gotten to UM, what he did in high school.
Freshman, he was like a dominant force coming out as a freshman, playing against some of the best teams in college football and in overpowering offensive linemen. That's just been a consistent part of his game. Just the power and play strength that Ruben Bain presents on a down-to-down basis. That's what's going to make him money in the NFL. Like, I get it. Maybe he's not a big sack numbers guy, but he's going to be a big pressures guy. He's going to be a big run stopper guy. And so maybe he doesn't rack up 15, 17 sacks per year. Maybe that's not him. But I think the guy you're going to get if you draft Ruben Bain is going to be a guy who you're going to have on your team for 10 to 12 years.
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of guy I see him being.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that was pressured, that was being double teamed a lot. He was held a ton. His strength was still there. His run defense was still there. I mean, you even look at the Ohio State game, he was making some incredible plays at all times. His sack production was still there. He had 9.5 sacks last year. And always felt like he was the reason why guys like Mesidor and some of the other defensive linemen were able to get easier, it was easier for them to get in because Bain was always the one that everyone was looking at, making their lives easier. That's how I've always felt about Bain. And it looks like that. I mean, that play should translate to the NFL. The way that he moves, his strength, his run game ability, and then his ability to set the edge, it's all there. It's all. I don't understand how any of that will just lose him because he doesn't have the arm size. I think it's a dumb debate. I understand measurables are important, but at the same time, we've been talking about this. I mean, people have been talking about this for Bain his whole career. I can't imagine it's being something that slows him down again.
Yeah, I just want to point to a guy who the measurables are entirely different. The careers are entirely different. But think about a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, who he was never that 10 to 12, like that 12 to 15 sack guy throughout his career. But teams always wanted him because he was constantly going to get after the quarterback. He was constantly going to bother the quarterback, and he was constantly going to defend the run, which I think, especially now with the way teams are starting to evolve and go back into these heavier sets, that's going to be the priority for your defensive lineman. Can you get physical at the line of scrimmage? Can you deal with a double team on the edge and still be able to prevent that running back from bouncing outside or bouncing through the hole? Like, that's what Ruben Bain was really good at in large spurts of his career here in Miami. And in terms of the draft prediction for Bain and Mesidor, I think they should both. I mean, Bain, I think, is going to be a top 10 pick, most likely top 5 in all likelihood. Mesidor, I think, you're probably going to get towards like back end of the first round, I think, really. As a Pats fan, I would love to see Akeem Mesidor kind of fall somehow to the Pats just because of his age and injury concerns down that end. But I think these are two guys who could very well go in the first round, especially because I think Bain and David Bailey are fairly safe in terms of the top half of the draft. But I think afterwards, when you get to that edge class, there's a lot of concerns about how are these guys 2 or are they 2, 3, 4 down type of players where you can have them out on the field the entire time. And I think Bain, we're going to continue to talk about it, but Bain, I think, is a 3, 4 down player. We saw him block a kick. He can play on special teams if you really want him to. But I think Bain can be on the field the entire time and be a phenomenal player for your team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost dead set on saying, almost willing to bet that both Mesidor and Bain are first round picks. I think Bain will be a top 5 pick. I think the Jets are in on him. The Jets, I think, are between 3 guys: David Bailey, Arvell Reese,
Jermaine Johnson trained most recently for Tavondre Sweat. I think it kind of opens up that edge room, and I think
yes. And if they do feel that Arvell Reese can be suited as an edge, I think they'll take Arvell Reese. Also, his versatility as an off-ball linebacker, really he also he had a great time at the draft. I love what he can do, Arvell Reese. It's also insane watching Ohio State defensive linemen play, or their whole defense play. The way they showed out in the combine.
They were phenomenal at the combine.
And then you think about the fact that Miami's offense played so well against them in that game. It's insane. I
mean, you look at the way Sonny Styles moved, and then you look at the fact that Mark Fletcher was the first person to make him miss a tackle all year. And you're like, look, these guys, Miami.
Styles' brother, Caden McDonald, Arvell Reese, that defense was absurd, and Miami played a very good game of football against them. It's very impressive. I think Mesidor, I mean, originally I thought he was going to be a late first. I think maybe if we're lucky, maybe if he's lucky, he might get a little bit higher into that like mid first, like the 15 to 20s range. I can't guarantee you that, but I know teams are starting to get a little more high on him. The sack production obviously was there. His age and his injury concerns are a factor, and I think that will hurt him. And one thing that I am looking at, because I am interested in the way they talk about Bain, I guess, versus the way they talk about Cassius Howell. Cassius Howell, shorter arms than Bain, had more sacks than Bain, but was also a completely different archetype of a player. He's projected, early second, late 1. But Bain, because of, I think, what he's proven over the last 3 years, I think his run defense and then his strength has kind of moved him towards a higher first-round pick rather than what Cassius Howell is. But it's an interesting debate because they kept talking about how I think Cassius Howell is like the second smallest arms ever in combine history or something like that.
Cassius Howell had smaller arms than Bain. I think the comparison was 30 inches and 7/8 of an inch in comparison to 30 and a quarter. So I think if they were both drafted in the first round, they would be the first and second shortest arms to be drafted in the first round, I think is the current stat.
Yeah. And I get the the takes where an edge rusher has never been that good with that arm size, but who's to say that correlation equals causation in that like that could just be a total coincidence. Like, we have no idea.
Like the comparison Bain's getting a lot right now is Brandon Graham. And I think if you look at his career, the amount of impactful plays Brandon Graham was able to make on the field for that Philadelphia Eagles team, like that's maybe not a guy you hang the jersey for, but pretty damn close to it if you're the Eagles. Like I said, that's a 10 to 12 year career off of being a great player for your team. And with a draft that maybe there would be more concerns. Maybe they maybe would fall further if this were a draft with this this Miles Garrett, Miles Garrett type prospect that had really no problem with the measurables and really showcased what they could be on all sides, both in terms of run defense, pass defense, and both those sense. But I think the only guy who has shown the ability to be phenomenal in both those aspects right now is Ruben Bain. He's the only guy who's shown the ability to rush the passer at that level and also defend the run at that level. Really, right now, what you're seeing with this edge group is a lot of guys who are either great run defenders or great, pass rushers. And there's not really a guy who falls in between of both, unlike Ruben Bain does. Maybe Orville Reese, but that's also because he's like a little bit of a hybrid linebacker, edge rusher type guy. But there's not really a guy who you'll find better at both than Ruben Bain right now. And that's why I think all the concerns about the arm length are so ridiculous, just because watch what he did in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Watch what he did for Miami throughout the season. This defense, I'll give all the credit in the world to what the secondary did, to what Akeem Mesidor did, to what the interior of the defensive line did. But up until I think around, maybe towards the back end of the season, we kind of lost it a little bit. But for the first half of the season, we were both talking Ruben Bain Heisman potential because of that ability in terms of being a force in the run and the pass.
Yep. His PFF numbers, I know we're not big PFF guys and they're not 100% accurate. His PFF numbers were through the roof. His pressure numbers were absurd. All of his stuff, his stats were insane. And it's also, he played against very good opponents in the entirety of last season. And he had his best season last season, where against teams like Notre Dame, team like Florida, a team like Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, teams that like A&M specifically, who was, almost boasting about, it won't be that hard to guard Bain. And Bain was a dominant force against them. Ohio State, who had obviously had a great offensive line, dominant. Indiana had a great game. All these teams against really good opponents, Bain proved it, that he could ball out, that he could play with anyone, he can hang with anyone. I think it's for me, if they're consulting me as a scout, Ruben Bain's top 5 pick. And if he went to my New York Jets, I would be very ecstatic. I'd be very happy for the game. Well, I would be upset for him because he has to play for the New York Jets, but I would be happy for him that he's on my team. And that would be, I think it'd be great. And I'm rooting for him big time. He's a great guy. There's a lot of guys. I mean, all these Miami guys, you're rooting hard for them. It's going to be good. It's good. I mean, I was thinking about this, that it's huge what these guys do for the future of the program. Because if you can hang your hat on, hey, if say Ruben Bain is an all-pro within 3 years, you can hang your hat on that defensive line and recruiting and say, hey, we made Ruben Bain one of the best, an ACC defensive player of the year, and then an all-pro in the NFL. Or Akeem Mesidor balls out, or Jacoby and Inez, or any of these guys show up in the NFL. These are guys you can point at and say, hey, we made these guys. These guys were Miami guys. Now they're in the league doing their thing. It's a great recruiting sign. It's a great thing for recruiting and for the program in the future. You got to root for these guys no matter what they do in the NFL, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, we spent 20 minutes talking about Ruben Bain, but let's talk about some of the other guys who kind of impressed in this combine. I will say I really love CeCe Mauinoa's quote about, look, I will play anywhere you want to put me. Yeah. I think he probably feels strongly about himself being a tackle just because that's where he's played, but just to kind of fully state the quote, there are 5 positions. I'll make sure I take one of them. That's a guy I want on my football team, in all honesty. I know he's probably going to go somewhere top 10. I think Spencer Fano from Utah is really the only other guy people being talked above him. But I think CeCe, I know people think whether he's just strictly a right tackle just because that's what he's played a lot in college, or if he's moving inside the guard, that's what he's going to be. But I think just a point, the point again is, these guys on the Miami offensive defensive line, you can kind of put them wherever, and the physicality they showed. And look, you watch CeCe throughout the playoffs, and once again, kind of go into that thing, you watched him against the best competition. And did we ever feel like CeCe was letting the Miami offensive line down in terms of being pressured a bunch? No, never. I think he held his ground, and more so held his ground just because the Miami offensive line, obviously run blocking was physical, dominant throughout the playoffs. But pass blocking, Carson really didn't get touched for most of the playoffs, if we really want to talk about it. So, I think just another guy where you look at it and you're like, he's a brick wall on whether he's your right tackle, your guard, wherever you want to put him. I think CeCe can lock it down wherever he is.
He's only credited to allowing 2 sacks and over 1,055 pass blocking snaps over the last 2 years. incredible stuff from a guy that he's also great in the run game. He's incredible as a run blocker. I think everything about CC is like every time you watch them, you always felt comfort knowing that CC was going to be that guy on the right side. He was going to be great. And one thing from that quote that you also mentioned, he name drops Mirabal, mentions how he was talking about during practice, say, hey, some teams might look at me and say, hey, I need to, what if you were to play guard? So he asked Mirabal and said, hey, put me at guard for a few reps. And he was doing guard work during practice against some of these guys. So I love the way that his mentality and his mindset of him just saying, I'll go anywhere, wherever I can succeed in the league, wherever I can find my place in the league, put me there. His mindset and his mentality is top notch. He's another guy that I'm looking at, that top 10 pick, probably, the way that they're talking about him. I mean, he deserves it. Every time you watch that Miami offensive line over the last 2 years, it's been nothing but, I mean, Carson, you had Cam Ward just sitting still in the pocket for over 10 seconds. Carson Beck had so much time in the pocket. So you have all these guys. The offensive line was incredible, and it starts with the guy on the right side. He had a great year, and I think a team like Cleveland or a team like Arizona could 100% use the guy and put him at the right tackle spot. And a guy that deserves it 100%.
Yeah. I think great dude. I had a class with him freshman year, and the guy would like it. They're football players. You don't expect them to put in the work, but I was partnered up with him for my final project, for my profile project, actually. And he put in about as much work as I did. Like, I think that's the type of guy that you want in your locker room, the type of guy who's going to kind of put in the work regardless of where he's assigned. And I think, like, we talk about from that quote, whether he's going to Mirabal, talk about, okay, teams might look at me as a guard. How can I play guard? And, learn that type of stuff. I think like, regardless, you think I'm a Pats fan, so I'm going to go back to my guy, Mike Onwenu. He's a guy who played right tackle, right guard, moved around the offensive line, and was really good at wherever the team put him. And I think when you can be a guy like that and kind of develop yourself personally to kind of, I'll do whatever's good for the team right now. You might be best at one position, whether or not, but I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be a great asset for a team wherever you put him. Like, he's going to put in the work, he's going to put in the time and learn how to be great at what he's doing. I think he can be a great tackle, but if a team looks at him as a guard, then so be it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think he's going to be a great player in the NFL just because, look, we've been around all these guys a bunch. Like, we've seen them kind of grow, come through the program and how they've developed. They put in the work to be great wherever you kind of assign him. Just whether it's Ruben moving around the defensive line, CC moving around the offensive line, they're going to be great players. So I fully believe that wherever you think CC is, as an NFL scout or coach, he's going to be great for you there. So I don't know too much about Spencer Fano because I know that's the one guy really going ahead of him in terms of these mock drafts consistently. Mm-hmm. But I know this guy, CC, is going to be great in the NFL because of who he is and the development that he's put in since his time here to kind of come in as a freshman, start, and be this kind of rock along the offensive line for Miami that he's been.
Yeah, his mindset is there. I remember they were actually, one of the concerns they had for him was his arm length, and then I believe his measurables were saying he had a good arm length. He actually was above average size, whatever. People were comparing him to Penei Sewell, which I think is just because they're two Samoan guys. I think that's crazy, but that's neither here nor there. But for CC, I think he's. I mean, his mentality's there. I mean, I remember talking to him during the media day for the playoff. Super nice guy, very down to earth, very just
great dude. Like I said, I had him for one of my classes as a freshman. Great dude, very chill dude. And I saw him again.
Mentality's there. The way that I was asking. Yeah, I'm very happy for him, and all of these guys. We've gotten to know a lot of them, over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Whether being in press conferences or interviewing them, or even having class with some of them. They're genuinely good guys that have a great mentality and a great mindset, and you really hoping nothing but the best for them.
And another dude kind of, I think, made maybe not a lot of money for himself was that man, Markel Bell, was moving in the 40-yard dash. He came in 6'9", 346 pounds, clocked a 5:36 40-yard dash. For those I
That is
consider myself pretty athletic. When I did the 40-yard dash at National Championship Media Day, 5:08. That man, Markel Bell, was moving.
that is
Watch that 40-yard dash. And look, another guy, we talked about it when we're talking about Senior Bowl. He had that one bad rep, but kind of tightened it up as things went on. And just the sheer size and physicality and what you saw on that left side of the Miami offensive line from him, it's going to be, I mean, it should translate to some level when you get to the NFL.
Yeah.
He's too big and too physical and powerful to really just
third tallest player at the combine since 2003. His pancake. I mean, one thing I remember watching from him. His first year at UM, he was kind of rotating with Jalen Rivers. He'd play at the right. Jalen Rivers would be guard, and he was kind of struggling. He was here and there. He wasn't like the best in terms of blindside. I mean, the offensive line still had a really good year, but he was rotating. He wasn't playing 100% of the snaps. Got the full-time job this year, and I thought I was very impressed with a lot of things that he did. One of the best things, and you talk about it, was his speed, his agility to make a lot. I mean, a guy that weight and that height shouldn't be able to move in the way and move as fluidly as he does. And the pancake blocks that we saw from him all year, and a lot of the plays that he made in a lot of the screens, because Miami ran a ton of screens, and a lot of the runs on the outside, whenever there were, Bell was a menace out there. I remember there's a couple reps. There's a screen to, I believe it's to Josh Moore, and Markel Bell absolutely obliterates D'Angelo Pons on a play.
If Josh Moore's knee wasn't down, he had a lane for himself right there.
And then there's another one. I think it's just a Fletcher run, and you can just watch Markel Bell on the bottom of your screen pancaking an Ole Miss linebacker. That's who he is. The physicality's there. He was incredible in the run game. He's a dog. His strength is going to be top notch. I don't know exactly how, where teams are going to see him. I don't expect him to go anywhere. I think he'll be a late round pick.
Yeah.
Maybe a guy that will be a backup for his whole career. But if he can find a way into a role and someone can develop him into being a legitimate NFL starter, I mean, that's a scary man.
Absolutely.
Size.
Absolutely, Jaden. I think he's just a scary dude, and especially when you get those kind of you're the tackle and you're the lead blocker on some of these runs. If you're a DB or a linebacker and that 6'9", 346 pounds is coming straight towards you at whatever speed he was going in the combine, that's a scary sight to see.
Yeah.
I think.
Sorry, I was in the press.
Just imagine him as that rotational extra offensive lineman who kind of comes in every now and then and is very valuable, but you don't see him too much. And then that lines up on the outside as that little fake tight end type of deal. That's a scary sight to see if I'm a defensive end, if I'm a linebacker, or if I'm a corner, and that's running straight towards me. I think the one concern in terms of him being a full rotational player is just when you're that big, guys are kind of able to get under you and get that leverage, which I think is what we saw at the was it the Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl? I forget exactly. It was one of them, but what we saw in that rep where he kind of got knocked back a bunch was the guy got under him. He was just a little too big, couldn't get his arms on him fully, and then he gets knocked back and driven back. That's why he might not be this kind of full-time offensive lineman, but if he can really work on his leverage, stay low, and kind of get under guys, that amount of strength and size is really going to get after defensive linemen at the NFL level. It's just he's got to kind of work on himself to kind of fully get under guys, keep that leverage kind of even, and then move guys with the size that he has. Because I think if he can do that, the arm length, the size, and physicality that he can present, we saw it week after week with this Miami run attack, especially in the playoffs. You can move guys around with that.
I agree. I mean, there are a couple. I remember just about his size. I remember being in the press conference room one, and I'm watching, kind of looking up and seeing him. Just he's an absolute mountain of a man. It's insane how big he is if you see him in person. Ridiculously tall, a total alien. But he had a couple of games we even watch, and I remember his game against A&M was a legitimate stud of a game where he had again. The way they talked about A&M's defensive line was one of the best in the country, potentially better than Miami. That's what they were talking about entering that game. Had zero pressures, had one of the best pass block grades of his career and in 25 pass block snaps. That's the guy has proven it that he can be a very good player. He has the upside, I think, but I think he's a raw prospect, a very raw talent that is gonna need some development, some coaching. I think if he could be a late round pick, he can maybe be a backup. And if something happens where he can get into a spot, I think he can really do something. He does need that development. I think he is raw, which can make sense for why he was, kind of in that spot. I know someone had said that if he ended up getting that waiver, did one more year at Miami, we could be talking top 3 round pick if he did one more year at UM.
Because I believe this year was his first year as a full-time starter, correct? If I'm not
Yes,
wrong.
he was kind of doing well. So obviously he did JUCO for 2 years.
Yeah.
He was great. He was a top JUCO player. It was his second year at Miami. His first year at Miami, he was rotating a little bit. When Jalen Rivers moved to guard, he would play left tackle. Jalen Rivers played left tackle. He would be out. So he wasn't playing every single snap. This year, he played every single snap. I thought he was very impressed. I was very impressed with the way that he worked. But I think he is a raw prospect that's going to need some time for sure.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it again, but just that the sheer size and power is just a fun piece of clay to potentially mold with. And so whether you're, the Jets, the Pats, as we're fans of, I'm excited if that ends up on my team, just because if that develops into a guy you can hold on the outside, that's a perennial, Pro Bowler right there. If you can really kind of harness that sheer strength and physicality and size into a guy who can consistently start for you. I mean, I'm excited to see that as it kind of molds the NFL, regardless of where he goes. But I mean, that's in terms of the guys in the trenches. But in terms of other guys to kind of get to, Carson Beck had himself a pretty nice day when he was through those throwing drills. We don't have the official numbers in terms of the velocity drills, which I think is kind of like the biggest concern with Beck is how much zip can he put on the ball, especially deeper toward down the field. But he had a pretty good day against some, surprisingly tough competition, Jaden.
Yeah. I'll say this, his measurables, and I know we're going back and forth on measurables here. His measurables are very comparable to legitimate NFL talent. I think the way that ESPN or NFL Network compared him to Carson Palmer, which is a pretty damn good comparison. He had the biggest hand size among all quarterbacks, but I was very impressed with the way that he played. The booing, though, absurd. To boo any prospect, no matter your feelings on Carson Beck, for whatever reason that you may hate Carson Beck, makes no sense that, again, it was in Indianapolis. Say they're Indiana fans. What's your reason for booing him?
You won.
You beat us. You beat Miami. And if you're Notre Dame fans, you're gonna boo Carson Beck because he beat you. I don't get it. I think he's a prospect. He's a guy trying to go to the NFL. He's not. I don't know why he's considered this most hated player in college football. I've never really understood it. It has never made a lot of sense to me. Booing someone during the combine is ridiculous. I think Carson actually used it to his advantage, and I thought he actually had a really good day. He probably had, I think, among the quarterbacks that threw, he had one of the better days than a lot of them. I thought he looked like kind of that Carson Beck that you wanted to see maybe in 2023, and then at times in last year's season where he had, the Ohio State game where he was so poised and was a great game manager. I thought he actually played. I thought he showed off really well, and I'm hoping that maybe it turns into something as a career backup for him.
Yeah, I think just given the circumstance, Carson kind of playing through that booing and going off to have the day he did in those throwing drills, like you said, the measurables kind of all stacked up to kind of legitimate NFL starters. What you want to see from hand size and the I think it was he stands about 6'5", which is ideal size for your NFL quarterback. I think all the measurables kind of stood where you wanted it to be. And then you saw the throwing drills. I don't take too much away from throwing drills because it's guys playing with guys that they've never played with before. So those timing routes, there aren't really pristine. A lot of them, we saw Diego Pavia on his first one, kind of not hit his target. Just kind of stuff that comes to mind. We remember Will Howard from last year, the first one where he kind of just launched it into nowhere and people got on him for that. I think it's too much to take into the until
I remember there was a Tyler Shuck throw where it was like that, where he threw a really like a dud, and Tyler Shuck's an NFL starter right now.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I think guys, people get on the throwing drills a little too much. But once again, like I'll say, like I agree with you. The fact that you booed Carson Beck at his combine performance is like you won. You got the natty. They might take it away because of ineligible fifth year players. But that's beyond our concerns, really. Like, Carson had himself a very fine day, and the fact that he had to deal with booing for no reason, really, I agree with you. He's earned this bad rep for no real reason. We saw him a decent amount when he was here, and the guy was really down to earth in his press conferences. I know he had a couple of bad quotes. When you listen to those quotes and they're kind of full context, they kind of got overblown and overshadowed the fuller meaning of what he said. I think Carson's a really good guy, and I think what you're going to see from him, where you're going to see really good football player, and what you're going to see from him at the NFL level, whether it's a backup, whether he can kind of push himself into a starting role, is going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I think he'll be a backup, but I mean, like, I will say, anytime you see a guy that has the measurables, they're probably going to get a spot in the NFL just because they have it, and they're like, oh, I could fix him. This has been said with Drew Aller. Drew Aller is like
another guy
who had they've said if you built a quarterback in a lab based on measurables, that person is Drew Aller. Drew Aller also may not be a top 5 round pick because Drew Aller didn't show himself at all during the season last year. Carson Beck as well as kind of did the same. So the measurables, sure, but in terms of him being actual starting quarterback, he's going to need a head coach that's going to really have to believe in him, and you really want him to be successful. I don't know who that coach could be or what team it could be. I'm rooting for all these guys. I am rooting especially hard for Carson because I really do think he got this weird rep that is just, maybe it came from Georgia fans, maybe it came from SEC fans.
A little bit at the combine. He's like, no hard feelings with Georgia. Like, I think Georgia, I saw one tweet about it. It's like, look, he decided he was going to the NFL. They gave Gunnar Stockton the full-time role. He transferred to Miami. That's literally all it was. Like, I don't like this idea that he's hated. Maybe he is hated by Georgia fans, but I don't really know why he would be.
He is hated by Georgia fans. I have no understanding of it.
Like, and this idea that he's this, he's this, just awful guy in terms of throwing his teammates under the bus. Like I said, is kind of just taken from a couple of quotes. I think overall were taken out of context with him. But in terms of, I just think the guy he's a football player. Like, stuff, I think he kind of gets overblown with the reputation that he's earned for whatever reason it be. And the fact that you're booing him, I don't think they booed any of the other Miami players.
No.
They just booed Carson.
Maybe it's his age, but he's 23 and he's younger than Mesidor. Like, I think it's that he just got this rep of him being this super old player that shouldn't have been played this year at all in college football. And then, like, he's for some reason, so easy to root against. Obviously, it's for a lot of fans, they hate Miami, which I can understand. Yeah,
it probably tosses into it all. The fact that
I think Georgia fans really push the narrative that, like, something happened between them that caused that rift, which is, I think it's just dumb. I feel for him, but he's going to the NFL and no one else, we're not. So yeah. I hope he succeeds just from that. I hope he has a chip on his shoulder from because it's a lot of booing that he had. Just like he didn't kill anyone. He didn't do anything.
Like, we've seen much worse people get the combine and get drafted, and I'm not gonna mention names just in terms of rap sheets that they had behind them. But let me not go further. But like what I'm saying is there have been worse guys who have participated at the combine and have done things off the field that are really questionable. And I don't think Carson's really one of those guys who have done, like, the guy, like I said, in all my interactions and being in press conferences with him here and there, like I said, it's a couple of bad quotes, but overall, like, pretty chill dude. So to see him get the amount of boos he got, probably just because he was the Miami quarterback and you're in Indianapolis and the Indiana team just beat him. But I think that's uncalled for, especially when a guy's trying to perform the best he can. But I thought he participated really well in spite of all those things.
I agree.
Yeah, but to kind of move us along, there wasn't really anything else big. I think the one other thing we kind of talk about, which I don't think we're going to pit these guys against each other, is this kind of discussion that started to come about between who's better between Bane and Mesidor.
Mhm.
I think it's something slowly starting to kind of creep up on people, which I don't personally see, but I think some people are trying to kind of start to say. In terms of the rest of Miami, I mean, CG Daniels, I think had a pretty good gauntlet drill. Inez, I didn't see too much from, but Jacoby Thomas had a pretty good one of those DB drills that I saw where the fluidity looked pretty good. But I think the last main draft conversation is this Bane versus Mesidor kind of convo that started to get stirred up. Jaden, we talked about Bane a bunch already, but what's your kind of quick perspective on that?
I mean, well, I'll say this. I thought that if you were to look at maybe in the beginning, like if you were to look at the encapsulation of the year, if you were to say that Bane and Mesidor were the top two defensive linemen from this year, I could agree with you on that. To say that Mesidor was better than Bane, I'm gonna disagree. I think it's kind of hard to. Well, I think as a prospect, you want to go Bane anyway because of just the overall, I mean, the age and the potential. One being almost 4 years younger it's a pretty big factor. As a player, I mean, it's Mesidor maybe showed off more of like him being a grown ass man against 18-year-olds. I could see that. I think the overall player, give it a year or two would be Mesidor though, would be Bane, just for the fact that Bane is the way that he played, the pressure. He had more pressures than Mesidor. He had a very similar sack record. Mesidor or Bane was double teamed and held significantly more than Mesidor. I thought Bane actually opened doors for Mesidor to be one-on-one. Again, I'm not going to pit against each other. I loved watching Mesidor play. I thought he had a great year. But I thought Bane was the one that was opening doors for Mesidor to kind of do the rest, where they were kind of going back and forth, where they had one, and the other one had another. Bane was better in the run game. Mesidor was good in the run game, but Bane was just better. Like, they're both great players. I'm excited to see what they both do in the league. I guess I can see it just from a physical standpoint of Akeem Mesidor is a 24-year-old that played against guys that were younger than him, and he showed off his who he is. But I'm gonna just lean towards Bane regardless.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree right there. Like I said, as a Pats fan who's gonna be towards that 30, 31 type pick, Mesidor is kind of a guy I really want to lock in on just because I know we're both agreeing Bane's the better player overall in terms of what he was last year and the amount of upside he presents. But Mesidor, in terms of you have all those measurables already there and the ability he was able to put on tape year in, year out, especially last year where he was kind of constantly getting after quarterbacks, I think it was really special. I think we're going to see from both of them is that I think Mesidor might be like if they both turn to stars, Mesidor might be the bigger sack number guy if they both turn to stars, but I think Bane is going to be your better player overall. I think Ruben Bane, is going to turn into a 10, 11, 12 sack guy if he hits the peak that I see him as, and maybe Mesidor is close to that number too. But I think when you look at the two of them right there, I think Mesidor might be the more polished edge rusher kind of out the gate. And as a Pats fan, we didn't get a lot of sacks last year. I love K'Lavon Chase on, but if you're a team looking for a pass rusher who's ready to go and has that full arsenal, is very, very well developed and skilled and kind of, what you're going to get out of him. Akeem Mesidor is a great player that you're going to be able to pick up immediately, has all of that experience, and is going to be a, 2-3 down player right off the bat if you go and pick him up. I think the measurables, the size, and the physicality on the edge as a pass rusher that you're going to get from Mesidor is going to be noticeable out the gate. And I think with, the slightly longer arms that Mesidor gives you, maybe is better. I don't really care because I think Bane's the better player. But I think both of them are going to be great players fairly quickly. But if you want that guy who's more experienced out the gate and you're towards the back end of the draft, I think Mesidor could go as high as really 20 if you really think about it. In terms of those edge rushers coming in the back end of that draft. Like I think he has very much a right to be a first round pick. I just wouldn't pick him against Bane.
Agreed. I think that's kind of where I'd leave it at because we've both seen them. We both watched them play consistently and thought Mesidor was great. And I still think overall I'd rather Bane just for the fact of what I can see in the future. I actually think Mesidor, if he were to get drafted, he could slot in right away and be a
100%.
be a guy that could kind of start right away and just put up some good numbers as a rookie. I think he could easily do that right away. Bane, on the other hand, I think it's gonna I think you are gonna have to see some maybe development I mean, look, the dude's 20.
Yeah,
His weight is not comparable. Like, he's 263 pounds. If someone wanted to move him inside, which I don't think they will, but if someone wanted to move him inside, he's gonna have to gain weight and kind of play a different play style. It depends on the way that whoever uses Bane uses him. The way that I see it, I think Mesidor right away. I think no matter what he'll do, he can maybe just get into a rotational spot and make some plays right away.
yeah. I once again I agree. I think Mesidor might be the day one type guy that might be better those first few weeks or like season potentially. But I love what Bane presents as a pass rusher and especially as a run defender right away. I think the pass rush skills, as he kind of works around maybe that arm length or whatever you want, or if they move him inside, kind of working on his build to kind of get that weight on him. And I think he's already very really powerful wherever you line him up. But
Yeah.
as he kind of develops that weight, if you want to move him inside, if you want to stick him on the edge consistently, I think he's going to be a great edge rusher, regardless, or a guy you move all around the field. But to keep things going, Jaden, would you rather talk about recruiting, or would you rather talk about where Miami filled out those most recent couple of staff spots that were missing?
Let's talk a little recruiting. All
right, we will talk a little bit of recruiting, and the first one is a guy who might impact things next year. Is JUCO transfer to Kai Aziz. We had a little bit of a problem with Miami cornerbacks catching the football as the season kind of winded down. But what I will say is, Takai, really good guy, very productive on the ball, and he posted 3 interceptions and 2 pick sixes in 2025. Typical outside corner type build, 6'3", 180. Had 12 pass breakups as well when you want to look at that as well. Kind of a cool guy you can kind of toss into that corner rotation. And that's all I'll really mention about him. We'll kind of see him as he goes along in spring training. But the big names on the docket are going to be Nick Lanier and Mark Matthews. Is Miami going to be able to bring those names home? Jaden, what do you really think about either one, really?
I mean, I love Matthews. Matthews, the offensive lineman, correct?
Matthews is the offensive lineman.
I mean, I can already envision the way looking at Matthews, and I can just say, if you have Mark Matthews on the left side and you have Jackson Cantwell on the right side playing together, I think you have 2 incredible athletes going at it. As your edge guys down the offensive line, I think they'd be both incredible guys. I think Matthews is. I mean, he's the best offensive lineman in the country, from the 247 and everywhere else, from St. Thomas Aquinas. Like, there's no reason that I wouldn't want him. Obviously, we're going up against the big dogs as always with Ohio State and A&M. I will say, getting Cantwell and then also some of the recruits that they've been able to develop, what Mirabal has done over the last few years, I think it boasts an impressive resume that might be able to lead Matthews, and also the hometown being close to home would be enough maybe to convince Matthews to go there. I don't know what's in his mind, but I know Miami is going very, very aggressive for the kid, and I have no reason to believe they Miami should do everything they can to get the guy.
Look, well, just to kind of showcase what we're talking about, that is the number 1 offensive tackle, the number 1 player in Florida in that 2027 class. And look, let's see if we can toss on the highlights if we can. If not, we have access to them. Maybe I take a second to load. But point what we're saying is that Miami is a team built from the trenches, and if you're able to land this guy with what you just got with Jackson Cantwell being the player that he is, that's going to be a force to be reckoned with as this Miami team kind of grows for years to come. Kind of cut that off just because I can't see the highlights right now. But once again, this Miami team has built itself from the trenches. You look at what we just saw last year with that. It's a lot of guys leaving. And I think regardless if we think Miami's going to be a contender for next year, I think they're going to have to redevelop that offensive line for those years to come. And we're talking about guys who are coming back. We have why am I blanking on some of the guys in the middle, but Samson Okinola is a guy that you're going to want to watch. Sorry, I'm blanking on the other guard. Matthew McCoy is a guy who you're going to want to watch as we go into next year. And There's
Wait,
one more offensive lineman I'm blanking on right now. That's another guy you're going to want to watch.
Ryan Rodriguez? I
Ryan
don't know. I
Rodriguez,
don't
no,
know.
another name. Cristobal was big on him. I literally was looking at this the other day.
Is it one of the transfers?
Not one of the transfers. Offensive line.
But yeah, I mean, offensive line is the position that we've kind of been talking about quite a bit of. If there is any concern for next season, what you would be concerned for the offensive line, and just for the fact that these are just a bunch of guys that we haven't played or haven't played a whole lot chemistry wise. That is not the same as the offensive line of the last 2 years. There's only Okinola, who wasn't even a full time starter, being the one of the main pieces back, and McCoy, who also wasn't a full time starter, being the main pieces back. You're going to need both of them to kind of step up, and then you're asking quite a bit from the number one player in the country in Jackson Cantwell, and and whoever else.
It was Ryan Rodriguez. That was the guy I was thinking of. But yeah, Ryan Rodriguez was the guy I was thinking of. And like you said, you're asking a lot of guys, a lot of guys next year who haven't played too much per se. But I think we're both really we're both really trusting of the kind of infrastructure that Miami has here. The guy I was thinking of are some of the younger guys like your Max Buchanan or Jaden Wilkerson that might have to step in the roles next year as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely see as we get closer and closer into spring and then fall camp who Miami is starting to favor as we get closer to it. It's going to be a fun battle for sure. I mean, I think there's so many positions that you can look at and say there's going to be a fun battle at in terms of what it looks like as we get to week 1. You can look at either quarterback 2, you can look at the running back room, some of the receivers. There's a lot of different things you can look at and say, oh, there could be a little battle here. There could be a little, I'm interested to see what this could look like. And when we get into fall camp, when we get into spring camp, we'll see what kind of shapes out, as we see it on the field, as we're getting so much closer to it. I need to get to fall camp or spring camp as soon as possible. I can't lie.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun because you think about the amount of young guys on this Miami roster trying to prove themselves. We have obviously some like the solidified veterans that are coming back and are going to have significant roles, but I think there's a lot of fun young guys who are on this roster, especially in that receiver room. We saw we saw a little bit of Josh Moore was a guy that kind of flashed in spurts when we had time to see him last year. But you kind of, you look at the intriguing amount of size and athleticism that he presents in that receiver room, that, another year of Armando Blunt or
Marquise Lightfoot.
Marquise Lightfoot kind of gives you just more guys kind of stepping into those bigger roles, whether they're in the wide receiver room, the defensive back room that was really young last year, especially among the transfers. You had some of like your mainstays, obviously, like your Jacoby Thomas and Keontae Scott who are gone now. But another year of Xavier Lucas, another year of Dylan, Damari Brown, another year of Bryce Fitzgerald. Just those guys kind of developing as those younger guys who kind of stepped into bigger roles last year, kind of fully taking on the responsibility that that you expect out of them. I think it's going to be really exciting to see.
Yeah, one thing I love specifically, you mentioned the DB room. I think there's a ton of continuity within that room. Apart from losing Thomas and Scott, there's a ton of continuity that is coming back between Frederic, Damari, O'Connor, Lucas, Fred Fitzgerald, Poyser. I think and then you bringing in a guy like Omar Thornton and potentially Conrad Hussey. Like there's a lot that you can look at and say, there's a lot of depth. There's a lot of pieces that are returning with the Heatherman system. Obviously, lose Etheridge. They're going to replace the DB coach eventually, but there's a lot of pieces that you could say there's returning pieces. A lot of this team is returning, which is great. Obviously, losing the defensive line hurts, but I think you're going to have some of the guys that are going to, kind of step up, and then offensive line as well. And I trust, Mirabal and Jason Taylor, who I believe are our two best assistants, that they're going to be able to get these guys in shape and kind of put them back into the offensive line, the defensive line that we saw last year, which is one of the best in college football, because that's kind of that's Miami's bread and butter. And it's been that way for the last couple of years. We win games because of the trenches. The trenches are a little depleted because of the draft. You're going to have to replenish. You're going to have to kind of make new and make do with it. And I trust in Mirabal and Jason Taylor and everyone that they're going to step up and figure this stuff out.
Yeah. I mean, like I have a lot of belief in what we've seen from the trenches, especially. I know we lost a lot of big guys, and the fact that you're going to have 4 starters out of that room going to next year is going to be a lot to deal with. But I think what you're going to see from a lot of these younger guys is the ability to kind of step up and make plays when you need them to. And I think in terms of recruiting, the biggest name on a lot of people's minds is Nick Lanier out of oh, sorry, I want to make sure I'm good. I'm correct with the right team he's on right now. But Nick Lanier out of South Florida is the big wide receiver name that's going through a lot of people's minds. And just we could put on huddle highlights, so we will actually have highlights for you here from a sophomore season. But these are the most recent highlights that we have out here. He's the kind of biggest question that Miami fans are kind of worrying about in terms of where he goes. He's most recently limited to his top 5 teams. And as this outside receiver, really fun prospect to really think about in Nick Lanier. Miami's currently one of the 5 finalists they're going to see for the wide receiver out of Miami Carroll City High School in Apalaca. He's currently, I think you've talked 24/7. Miami's currently the warmest on him in terms of where they predict him right now. But he's going to be the big name as we kind of go through this recruiting class that, along with Mark Matthews, is one of the names Miami's trying to lock down.
Yeah, and I mean, I like Nick Lanier. Another receiver would be, you can't go wrong with another receiver, especially a stud like Nick Lanier. I was actually going to mention something that I saw, and I know that we were going to talk about KJ Caldwell. Yes. I saw an expert prediction on 3 of recruits in Miami. He is visiting Miami in June. Hopefully that's when they lock it down. He was recruited by Etheridge, which could be a potential issue, but Will Harris was also recruiting him. So we'll see if that changed anything. He's the 247 has him as the number 5 safety in the country, 75th player in the country. I don't know much about him. I like the name. I love KJ. I like the name. It's a great name. I think it's a guy that could be I don't know. I don't know. I don't know much about actually watching these guys in high school, but just looking at it from that angle, getting a 4-star safety seems to be a pretty good deal for me.
Yeah. And I think, we think the DB room's young until it's not. And then you're looking for guys to kind of, replenish that room as kind of time goes on. So another guy, we love our safety room right now with Bryce Fitzgerald, Zachariah Poyser, and the new Boston College transfer Omar Thornton. But you kind of wonder who else can kind of step to that type of room. Dylan Day could be that guy. And then you're looking forward, maybe a guy like KJ Caldwell kind of also be able to step into that room as a safety. So I think overall, my recruiting will kind of, once we have lockdowns on these guys, we can kind of give you more information, dig a little deeper into them. But right now, Miami seems to be trending towards locking down some of these guys, which are really promising. Like I said, I saw a few tweets. Don't know how true it is fully, but it seems like Nick Lanier is really trending towards being a Miami Hurricane. The best comparison I kind of heard was, maybe not career-wise, but in terms of the recruiting process, was, look, it's like JoJo Trader. It's not a matter of if, but when this guy ends up coming to Miami. It's what I've kind of seen kind of float around a little bit. So we'll give it time to kind of see where it eventually ends up going, but it looks like Miami could land this big-time wide receiver prospect. You think about the guys already coming into Miami. Think about a guy like Samorian Wingo who's coming here. And there's more guys I got to kind of toss around in my head. But Miami has a already promising wide receiver class coming into this year. And you think about next year, constantly kind of stepping up. We love the offensive line, but skilled guys are the guys who get the money. And it's really fun when you get an exciting skill guy in. There's another running back that I've seen kind of get tossed around in circles for Miami. Another big, fast guy that you're really going to want to see from this running back room. As some of the older guys, Mark Fletcher, think about next year, kind of, ends up going to the pros. So I think the Miami recruit class is going to be in nice hands, especially what Cristobal has been doing, but only time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're in a weird spot where, like, we think we're getting back to football. They are doing, workouts right now. Obviously, media is allowed. They're kind of just doing conditioning and getting back into the flow of things again. But once we get into it, we can fully do a deep dive and get right all the way back into it. So
absolutely. And we will. But for now, and for always, it's Shay and Jaden on another episode of Miami Primetime Live, brought to you by FanDuel. And now, along with another other Miami Hurricanes live and products and other Voice of College Football products you can find on Apple, Amazon, Google, and Spotify. Come to you soon. Thank you all for being here and have a great day as always.
Yes, I will be back for my call-in show on Thursday. We will not be doing anything next week due to spring break. So we'll be here this week, and then we probably won't be next week. We'll be back the week after. So
Yeah.
Thank you guys for all who tuned in. Yeah, thank you guys.
Have a great day
Peace.
and peace.